Good evening and welcome to Candid Conversations with the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. We're going to talk about today Michigan's state house maps. The Michigan State House maps. There's three collaborative maps. Once again, three collaborative maps. And we're going to talk about the Michigan State House districts. Before we bring our commissioners, I'm excited because we have the executive director of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission all the way from the southern part of Michigan. And she doesn't talk about the team down south. She's more concerned about the team up north, a Michigan Wolverine fan who's excited about the college playoffs and has already predicted a victory over the Georgia Bulldogs. Don't take her cheap. She has a bark, and most importantly, it's a Wolverine bark. Let's welcome the executive director of the MICRC, none other than Sue Ann Hammersmith. Sue, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Edward.
We have some great news to share, Sue. Some great news, something you have been working very hard to ensure openness and transparency. Can you go ahead and share this great news?
It's been quite a project, but very exciting for me to be a part of getting the maps published in Braille so people who are blind or who have visual impairments can participate in the process.
Available in Braille. Well, tell us a little bit, how can they access the maps, and tell us a little bit about the process, because it's not just like, doing a book or copying paper. Tell us a little bit about the process that went through to make this happen.
I worked with a company from San Francisco called Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired. They looked at the legal descriptions of the maps, and I approved all the printed maps before they then published the maps in Braille. So there's a different type of line, for example, for counties versus districts. And when the lines get really dense, then they have to do additional maps that provide that detail. So it's about a 60 or 70 page book of 11 by 11 pages, printed and available at any Braille library in the state of Michigan.
Wow. Any Braille library in the state of Michigan. And we see, Sue, that it's in Lansing, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Marquette, Rochester, Flint, Wyoming, Traverse City, Port Huron, Muskegon, and in Clinton Township in Macomb County, as well as in Taylor. 12. Wow, that's a lot of spots, Sue. So hopefully people have an opportunity to get there and ensure that their voices are heard in this historic process.
We sure hope so. And there's a good supply at the Lansing Talking Library, Braille and Talking Book Library. So anybody who lives near Lansing who would like to pick up a copy there or have somebody in their family pick up a copy for them, they can do so.
And they can dial 517-284-2880. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
That is such exciting news, and we want to share that. If you're learn more about Braille maps. The Braille map. This is exciting. This is exciting. And so once again, the commission is on its way to making a decision about these maps, and we know that comes up on December 28th. That's not the end of it, though, is it, Sue?
Well, it's certainly very important for people, all kinds of people, to have access to these maps. So yes, the commission will vote, anticipates voting on December 28th for the final maps. And then it will be 30 days before the maps go actually into effect.
30 days. Wow, 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 wow. Well, you have been very busy, even though we're not meeting every day. It's still stuff to do. What is the thing that keeps you going during this season right now?
Well, since the Braille maps have been published, I'm getting back to doing things like accounting and organizing other efforts. But we still do have meetings, and there's work to be done in between meetings, certainly with other staff members, and making sure that the wheels keep moving. So the process continues toward the plan to adopt the maps by the end of the month.
the end of the month, but not the end of the story. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Sue Hammersmith, the MICRC Executive Director, for coming on Candid Conversations to share information about the Braille maps, of the collaborative maps, as well as the individual maps. Is that correct? Are
Correct.
all available through the Braille maps at one of the 12 locations. Once again, if you would like to get information, call 517 284 2880. I repeat, that's 517 284 2880 to request a copy of the Braille maps, the books, so it can be mailed to you. And the person you want to talk to is Scott Norris. Scott Norris, the manager of the Braille and Talking Book Library right here in Lansing, Michigan. Sue, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we look forward to talking with you again real soon.
Thank you, Edward. Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, guess what? We got the dynamic commissioners who were here yesterday. They've come back for an encore performance for the Michigan House seats, the proposed Michigan House seats. You know, we call him a surgeon, a technician. You know, he knows how to use a scalpel and he knows how to put a Band-Aid on. But most importantly, he believes in sound medical practices and he studies like a demon, even though he's taken a break from med school to do his civic duty in serving the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission from Wayne State University and the city of Detroit. Let's welcome the one and only Commissioner Anthony. Commissioner Ede, welcome to the broadcast.
Hello, Edward. Thank you for having me on today.
Ladies and gentlemen, we always need a motherly type, someone that can speak truth to power, someone that has a calming influence, who has energy, who's energetic, and has a lot of fun. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We have this fun person who's calm, cool, and collective, but wants to make sure we follow the 7 ranked redistricting criteria from Northern Oakland County. Let's give it up for Commissioner Janice Villette. Hello, Commissioner Villette.
Hi, good evening. I'm happy to be here.
And last but not least, the math wizard himself, the one who puts the maps and together so that you can see what's happening behind the scenes. They call them witches, but we call them the Whiz Kid, all the way hailing from Howe, Michigan, by the way of Ypsilanti. Let's welcome Commissioner Dustin Witches. Welcome to the broadcast.
Welcome. Happy to be back here for today's presentation.
Again, thank you so much. We want to welcome you to Candid Conversations, and tonight we're talking about the proposed maps for Michigan's House District, and that's the collaborative maps. I repeat, the collaborative maps for the Michigan House District, and we really, really, really want you to tell people to come and join us for this edition of Candid Conversations. Yesterday, I repeat, yesterday, these commissioners did an outstanding job talking about the congressional and the state Senate. Once again, the collaborative districts for the congressional and the state Senate. And now we're going to talk about the House. And Commissioner Witches, we're going to have it kick off with you and with regards to that. And we're excited about that. And we're going to start with Pine version 5. Pine version 5. And let me add that to the screen at this time. And we'll go from there. Commissioner Witches, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So I have proposed House District map Pine version 5 up on the screen. There's 110 state House districts that we've drawn. Again, this is the maps that you're going to be seeing are collaborative maps, which means all of us, all 13 of us, drew these in turn, taking into account all the testimony that we've heard, as well as our own ideas for these maps. So the changes that you may see from map to map encompass that, the collaborative mapping process that we adopted as the commission. So As you can see, I'll start in the Upper Peninsula like I did yesterday and move down. But here we have the four districts in the Upper Peninsula, then going down into the Lower Peninsula. Now, these aren't as big as the ones that we saw yesterday because the population for each district is smaller. I believe it's around 92,000, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. But you can see here that we have an area dedicated to the Traverse City area, the northern portion of Lower Michigan, on the east side. Going down, we were just creating districts here that were of equal population and trying to take into communities of interest that we heard of when we were in Gaylord. We have somewhat of a lakeshore district, well, two lakeshore districts, but they're different configurations. We have one here which encompasses the Ludington area all the way down to Muskegon area. Below that would be the Holland area. And then we have this skinny district here, which is a lakeshore district that we heard a lot of public comment about. So we did our best to try and accommodate. Then we have our districts along the bottom of the state of Michigan with the Indiana and Ohio border. Zooming into the more metropolis type areas. Here we have the Kalamazoo districts and Battle Creek. You're going to see a difference. One of the major changes that you'll see in the maps that we're going to be proposing or showing you later this evening is how we handled Battle Creek and Albion. And then we have our Grand Rapids districts. We had a lot of public comment. In fact, the public hearings in the Grand Rapids area were some of the biggest. So we tried to accommodate all the public comment that we heard to create these districts that you see on your screen. Let me zoom out a little bit. Here's the mid-Michigan area with the districts breaking Lansing into different districts, which we heard public comment about doing. One portion that you see here with Midland is we kept the city of Midland in with Midland County. This is due to the communities of interest and public testimony that we heard. We kept the city of Midland in with Midland County and the House, but we separated them out to put them with the Tri-Cities and or with Flint when it comes to the congressional and Senate districts, which were on the screen yesterday. The thumb is still the thumb, just like in the maps that we showed yesterday. This is the Genesee area, Flint being a district, and then the areas surrounding Flint. And then here in Detroit, we had to get creative with our districts to comply with all 7 ranked criteria of the constitutional requirements that you have for drawing the districts for the state house map. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Edward at this point.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Witches. Commissioner Eade or Commissioner Verlette, any comment with regards to Pine version 5?
Go ahead, Janice.
No, I can't think of anything offhand. I mean, are we getting any questions?
We have some general questions, but I didn't know if there was anything you all wanted to share about the process, the collaborative process, or anything along those lines. And then we can go to some of the general questions that we have about the maps.
So I think all of the 3 maps we're going to show today are originally based off this cherry map. So I think it's important that the public knows that. We had some other options and prior drafts that we had with us during our public hearings, but the general consensus at those public hearings was that the cherry map was the best map, and it's the one that we should try to improve further. So you'll see, much like yesterday, you'll see a lot of similarities between these maps. And it's because they all kind of worked from this cherry collaborative map.
Now, when you say cherry, do you mean pine?
I'm sorry, I do mean pine. Yeah.
I just want to make sure. I don't want to, for quality assurance, just want to make sure we're on the same page, because I know yesterday we talked about cherry for the state Senate.
You know, we're in Michigan and we love nature out here. We got a lot of trees. So
That's
So
good.
sometimes I mix up some of the tree
And I
names,
love
but yeah,
cherries, so you had me excited, Commissioner E, because I love cherries. I'm a sweet cherry
yeah.
fan. And so thank you for that. Once again, what Commissioner E was sharing was it's an element of the pine as the base map for the collaborative maps that we'll see with regards to Magnolia and Hickory. We do have a couple questions, as Commissioner Villette has shared in the chat. We have some from Dave Gordon. Let's see, here's a question here. Since some precincts have 1,500 people and some precincts have 3,000 people, could the commission have divided up the larger precincts into smaller precincts to make drawing the districts easier? And I'll let you guys go with that because I know there's a variety of answers to address this.
Yeah,
Sure.
So,
Go ahead.
so
I'll let you go.
Okay. There are actually a lot of precincts in this map that are broken up. Using the software that we use in order to make these maps, we were able to go down to the census block level, which is one level further down than precincts. A precinct is made up of different census blocks. So we were able to go and look into census block levels in order to make up differences in population deviation.
You can. I zoomed in on the map to show the differences. So we could, if you look, the dashed lines are your county boundaries. The blue lines are your township boundaries. The yellow lines are your precinct boundaries. And then if you zoom in, the green lines are, in fact, the census blocks. And at this particular point, we could select just one of these green areas to assign to a district. So theoretically, if you follow this green line down and here and all the way back around, you could technically break a district down that far. Census blocks were the smallest level of geography that we could work with.
You're muted, Edward. Can't hear you.
Thank you. I muted my phone, but not the computer. So there we go. Could the commission have used an algorithm, the whiz kid, to develop the maps using the criteria established?
Yeah, there are some individuals currently out there that are developing algorithms to create districts. We had a presentation by one of these individuals named Dr. Petering, but we elected to not utilize an algorithm. I had an issue with it because I believe that takes the human component out of the process of redistricting. And I thought that was quite important to have. So that we can really weigh into the public comments that we've received, really discuss where we think boundaries should be for the districts. And the computer algorithm is not going to be able to do that. So this is a more intimate way of drawing the maps, I should say, and I'm happy that we did it this way as opposed to using a computer algorithm.
Yeah, talk about how could a computer algorithm deal with the 7 ranked redistricting criteria, especially when it comes to communities of interest. And we'll put that definition, scroll it at the bottom. Commissioner Witches or Commissioner Roulette or Commissioner Ede?
I would say that it couldn't, because that is the way that we took communities of interest into account was through public testimony, listening, and our own ideas of what we heard, and a computer, in my opinion, just isn't able to do that yet. I'm sure 30 years down the road, when artificial intelligence gets better, that could potentially happen. But in this case, no.
If my memory is right, I thought that when we spoke with Dr. Peterling, he wasn't able to follow the criteria, and that was the major reason that we decided not to go that route.
That's true, because you're right. He could assign a weight to the algorithm to put more emphasis on one particular part and less emphasis on another. But it was more along the lines of county and township boundaries, which were lower on our list than communities of interest. Communities of interest would be the hardest part for a computer algorithm to get right, as far as my opinion goes on those things.
Can you share why it's important, any one of you, why we need to follow the 7-rank redistricting criteria?
Well, it's
Well, it's a law.
Yeah, it's part of
For
the
one.
Constitution. I mean, we have to follow the Constitution. So that's the major reason.
And that's
Yeah.
how we prevent ourselves from, we can't stop anyone from doing lawsuits, but that's how we prevent ourselves from losing lawsuits.
Yeah, we want these maps to hold up at the end of the day. Let's say hypothetically there were to be a lawsuit that the commission loses and a particular part of a map needs to be redrawn. I just want to be clear that if that were to happen, it would be redrawn by the commission. Now, with that said, we did follow the 7-rank criteria. So, the reason why we did that is to protect from that kind of situation happening. We want these maps to pass and we want them to last for the next 10 years.
Yep, and just to add on to that, these were all collaborative. I know we've said that a lot yesterday and today. So we all took our own opinions and beliefs and ideas to what we've heard and the comments and testimony that we received from the public to really come up with these 3 maps. And all 3 of these maps follow the 7-rank criteria. And I would be happy with either one of these 3 maps that you'll be seeing tonight being adopted, because I'm a big believer of the collaborative process.
And the criteria was always at the forefront of our map drawing. It was always on our mind. It was always mentioned. We always used it in the ranked order.
Thank you. When the next commission gets ready to draw maps of Michigan in 10 years, would you recommend practicing with Ohio or another state again?
That's a good question. I often think about what the next commission is going to be doing. There were a lot of decisions that we made to come up to this point. For example, the previous maps that were drawn by the legislature 10 years ago, we didn't use that as a baseline in drawing this map. 10 years from now, they could decide to use our fair maps as a baseline, or they could choose to go a totally different route, like how we chose, and start from scratch again. But as far as practicing goes, doing it in another state might be a good idea, but I would maybe say instead of Ohio, perhaps doing a state that isn't shaped, mainly like a square. Part of the problem in Michigan is, no, it's not a problem, it's a beautiful thing, but we're shaped like a glove, and there aren't a lot of ways to split up a glove into nice little squares. So maybe picking a state with some more interesting geography might be a good way to practice.
Well, I think it also needs to be clear, with the Constitution, before the commission can draw any line, it must first hear from the residents. That was the whole purpose of the first round of public hearings, was to hear from the residents. And the reason why we didn't do any Michigan lines was because the Constitution said before you draw any line, you have to first hear from the residents. And so, Ohio, I think, was just a neighboring state, but like Commissioner Eads says, we need to find a glove or something closer to a glove. But that was, kind of the main reason behind it. And Commissioner Eads is right. It's kind of hard to find a glove that represents the beautiful Great Lakes state. Then it says, here's another question from Mr. Gordon again. In 10 years, when a new commission revisits making the maps, what advice would you have? And we'll start with Commissioner Villette.
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of things that I know that we've looked at that I thought that maybe we didn't really need to do. And I'm trying to think of Oh, when we numbered them as, did we number them as regions or something?
Mhm.
I would advise them not to do that. I didn't think that it really helped us very much.
Okay, the mapping regions. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Commissioner Eid or Commissioner Witches?
I would say hope and pray that there's not a pandemic that delays the census
There you
data,
go.
because that was a big hindrance in our in our process. We lost quite a bit of months. However, we rallied and we were able to create something great on all three plan types.
Thank you. Commissioner Eid?
So there are a few things that I often think about when looking back at this whole process. The first is, to really try to take a evidence-based approach, and when you're doing, like, you're practicing when drawing the maps, to keep that evidence-based decision making in mind. Because if you do that, it's more likely that those ideas will be taken up by the rest of your colleagues, because they were created, using evidence instead of just opinion or, just personal preference. That I agree with Dustin. Hope there's not a pandemic and a census delay. I mean, it was pretty extraordinary. We were able to do about 6 months of work in about a month and a half. And I wish we would have had that time back so we could have, made these maps even better. But, given the time constraints we're under, while not perfect, I think they're pretty darn good.
Thank you. From Poll Skeptic, going just off of shape, some of the districts look like examples of gerrymandering rather than a solution to gerrymandering. For example, Pine Districts 11 and 12 look extremely odd. Commissioner Witches, can you bring up Pine Districts 11 and 12 so that we can address the question from there?
Sure, this should be on the screen now. However, I want to give my piece on the definition of gerrymandering first.
Please.
Shape has nothing really to do with it. For example, I'll bring it right back, but as you can see over here, we have a skinny shape here as well. Gerrymandering does not mean that you have that you have a shape that isn't square or it may be a little bit elongated. Gerrymandering means that you intentionally drew a strange shape for political gain. And we did not do that. We did not take any kind of incumbent data into account or anything like that would, even though these look long, like districts 11 and 12, this was not drawn for political gain. These were drawn for adherence with the Voting Rights Act, which is why it looks like this.
Thank you, Commissioner Witches. Anyone else have anything to add to that question?
Well, the question was about which districts, 16 and 17?
No.
Pine Districts 11 and 12.
11 and 12. Okay, so, I think it's important, again, to keep in mind that we did this with analysis and using a data-based, evidence-driven process. We had an analysis during one of our Ann Arbor meetings at the University of Michigan, and what that analysis showed was that historically, districts in Detroit had been packed with African Americans at a much, much higher number than what was necessary for that community in order to elect a candidate of their choice. I mean, there were districts as high as, 85, 90%. And what that analysis showed was that in actuality, the amount of population needed for that community to have that opportunity, and I'm going to emphasize the word, the opportunity to elect those candidates, is closer to about 40%. So, while they look a little elongated, which, I agree with, I think the purpose is important. This map is going from about, in the past, you had 18 seats that a minority could possibly win, when in these maps, depending on which one you're looking at, that increases to anywhere between 25 and 28 seats. So it's an increase in those opportunity seats so that more people can elect representatives of their choice to represent themselves and their communities.
Thank you for that. Now we'll go to the Magnolia map. The Magnolia map that Commissioner Witches will bring up, and he will share the differences from Pine version 5. As Commissioner Ede so ably noted before, Pine map was the basis for these other maps that have had. And just want you to know that, just so you have a concept on how the commission built from map to map as it relates to doing the collaborative process. Let me add this to the stream.
Wait, hold on. The House district maps take a little bit longer to load since there are more districts.
Not a
So I'm
problem.
opening up the Magnolia
I have
right
fillers.
now.
If you want to share your feedback about the maps, go to www.michigan.gov/MICRC, and you can share your feedback about the maps on the public comment portal or the mapping portal. The mapping portal, when you go to the website, you click on propose maps, and it'll take you to the mapping portal so you can see the collaborative house. As you know, yesterday we talked about the collaborative maps are identified by trees, and the individual maps are identified by the submitting commissioner. Once again, the collaborative maps are identified by trees, and the individual maps are identified by the submitting commissioner. Next week, we're going to have Commissioner Rebecca Zatella has agreed to come on and talk about her individual maps that she suggested. So once again, we want to hear from you. Your feedback is very important about this mapping process. So please go to www.michigan.gov/MICRC, or you can go to and you can comment at the mapping portal or the public comment portal. As always, if you have information or questions, you can call us at our toll-free number, 1-833-U-DRAW. That's 1-833-968-3729. I repeat, 1-833-968-3729, and we can assist you with any information that you may need. However, we cannot take public comment on the toll-free number, so you can't leave a message or ask someone to do that. All of that has to be done through the public comment portal, or you can come to one of our meetings. Our next meeting takes place a week from today, December 16th, at the Cadillac Place in Detroit, Michigan, starting at 10 o'clock a.m. Now I can bring up the Magnolia map. Commissioner Witches, thank you.
All right. So the Upper Peninsula and the big part of the Upper Lower Peninsula stayed roughly the same. There could be some minor differences and changes based on shifting, because as I said yesterday, if you change one particular area in the state, there's a ripple effect that goes through every single district, some smaller and some larger. So there could be some, like maybe one particular county would be, or one particular township or part of a city, or maybe even a census block could be added into one particular district to accommodate the shift that would have happened in a different area of the state. The west side of the state is about the same. We have areas here at the bottom that are roughly the same, if not just slight changes. Here we have that one particular area in Battle Creek that we changed during our collaborative process to include the city of Albion due to public comment that we have received. I believe this is different, 46 and 47 on Magnolia as well, which would be encompassing Jackson and Ann Arbor. And by that, I mean parts of Jackson County and Ann Arbor. Genesee looks to be roughly the same. Midland Bay City looks to be roughly the same. And then there were some changes in the Detroit area, which I will let anyone else discuss. I tried to see if I could get a shape file of the differences to be overlaid on top, but I could not get that to work for some reason.
Okay, Commissioner Eder, Commissioner Roulette, would you like to
Yeah.
comment about the Detroit area?
So in this map, Magnolia, we took the feedback that we got from our second public hearing in Detroit and incorporated those ideas into this map. Those ideas mainly focused around putting neighborhoods back together. In the Pine map, there are some neighborhoods that were inadvertently split up. There are a lot of neighborhoods in Detroit, and they're not all, in nice shapes. So they inadvertently had gotten split, and we were able to put up a neighborhood overlay onto the Pine map in order to fix that problem and put back together specific neighborhoods. There are also a few changes around the Southfield area and also around the Novi area. I believe that the Novi area in this map has a district that has a higher Asian American population than in the other versions, which was there you go. There's the overlay right there.
Yeah, I just say I got that added. So the red lines are what we were just looking at with the Pine version 5. The colors would be the Magnolia map, so you can see the differences.
Yeah, so as you can see, there are many differences around the Southfield area, and again, centered around putting areas back together in Detroit. Yeah, so you see if you look at the red outlines, that is the Pine map, whereas the colored districts, that is the Magnolia map. So there were quite a lot of differences, and we did quite a lot of reconfiguring in the Detroit area in order to, listen to the public and try our best to incorporate that feedback while still maintaining the Michigan constitutional criteria.
Now, Commissioner Villette, we know that communities of interest is the third ranked criteria. And when it comes to neighborhood, we identify those as historical characteristics. Would you like to elaborate or say anything with regards to that?
Well, I think that especially in Detroit, we had Commissioner, I'm sorry, Brittany Kellum. Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. She was a really, really big help. Also, Commissioner Curry, who both live in Detroit, and they did help us with the neighborhoods. It was very important to the people who lived in those neighborhoods to be able to stay together and be able to hear their voices heard with their neighborhood.
Commissioner Witches, is there a way we can talk about the percentage of African American voters in that particular map for Magnolia?
On a district level, I mean, I can bring up the numbers here in regards to districts, and you can see the percentages here per district. The districts start in Detroit with number 1, and then they go radially out. But you can see in one particular column here, see if I can highlight the whole thing. I don't think I can.
Is there any district over 50% or more?
Yep, we have a couple of them. District 4, which is right here.
Okay.
We have District 5. District 6, which should be next to each other. So again, these are elongated, but we brought the percentages up here. 51 would be District 9. Let's see, where did that one run off to? Right here. This is basically the Detroit area. And and we have another one here, which would be District 16. Redford and parts of Wayne County.
Okay, great. I just wanted to do that to address the question that we had from Yvette McElroy Anderson. Thank you so much. And as we all stated earlier, all the collaborative maps were found to be in compliance with the Voting Rights Act by our VRA Council.
Correct. And the analysis that we received from our VRA Council, as well as our racial polarized voting analyst, was very helpful in drawing and configuring the districts, especially on the ones where we started, because as we stated earlier, Magnolia is a derivative of Pine version 5, and that we just took that information into account when we were changing the districts.
Great.
And another pretty interesting thing we were able to do as far as looking at data. I believe for the first time, a study took place that looked at if there's racially polarized voting in Michigan. And from that analysis, we were able to see, different minority groups that may vote similarly and different minority groups that might not vote similarly. And it was really interesting to see how different communities, whether they vote with each other for the same candidate, whether they vote for other candidates. I'll give you an example. We were able to look at the Arab American community, and we found that the Arab American community in Dearborn often votes the same way as African American individuals in Detroit. But when you looked at a different Arab American community, such as the Chaldean community in Sterling Heights, well, we saw that they voted a little differently. And we were able to look at that and take all of that data into the process of drawing these maps, again, so that we could create opportunity districts. So in effect, more minorities can have representation in these maps.
Commissioner, can you talk about how Arab Americans are classified on the census and why that's a challenge?
Oh, I would love to. This is a topic that I'm pretty passionate about. Obviously, I am Arab American. I'm half Chaldean, half Lebanese, and there is something that not only I think, but something we heard over and over again at our Dearborn public hearing from the folks in Dearborn, was how demoralizing it is that there is not a Arab American or North African checkbox on the U.S. Census. That makes it so that most people of Arab American descent either list themselves as Caucasian or put other or multiracial or something like that. And that has it's a real detriment to the community, because they are then unable to advocate for themselves, to secure federal funding for issues, secure things like language services, and other issues, and just generally advocate for their community, because not having that essentially renders them invisible. And that was a real problem that we faced, trying to figure out where the Arab American community is. Most people know, it's in Dearborn. Yeah, but where in Dearborn, right? Where specifically are the Arab American individuals? Because they are a group that's protected by the Voting Rights Act. Now, they're a group that's protected, but it's hard to identify them because their information isn't there in the census. And we kind of found a workaround in order to figure out where they were located by looking at the 2018 primary election data. There was a candidate in that election who was of Arab American descent. And one of the things we were able to look at is how different areas voted for that candidate to figure out where those individuals were.
Thank you very much. I just want to point out, it says, given that there are ripple effects caused by any changes, and there are over 110 districts, actually over 100 districts, there's actually 110 Michigan House districts. Can you really tell how all of the other districts were affected after each change? And I know you guys know what the answer is for that. but I'll just let you go ahead and say it in one word. I mean, I don't know who's
Go
going to
ahead,
say
Dustin.
yes, but one of the three can say it, and you can tell them how.
So the short answer is yes. We were able to determine how making a change to one district affects another district. But I'll tell you, I've lived here in this state my whole life. And when I got selected for this commission, I didn't even know there was 110 House districts. I mean, I don't know how many other commissioners, shared that amazement in learning that there was 110 House districts in Michigan. That's a lot, especially when you compare it, our legislature, our state legislature, to other states. Um, and that made it so that we, in effect, were drawing 110 House districts, 38 Senate districts, and then another 13 congressional districts, almost 150 districts. And I don't know how my colleagues feel, but that certainly was a major task. However, when you change one district, right, you have to change the other districts around it because you have to fall under a certain population delta or difference between the districts to make them compliant. All of our districts in this map are within about 2.5% of each other population-wise. And then once we do that, we're able to run a tool that was developed for us where we could see the overall fairness of the map. So towards the end of the process, anytime we would make a change, we would then run that analysis to make sure that we were going on the right track.
Thank you. Last but not least, we have the Hickory State House map. The Hickory State House map. Now, once again, you have to admit, Commissioner Eade, Commissioner Roulette, and Commissioner Witches did not shy away from any of your questions. Any of your questions. If you put something in Facebook, if you put something in YouTube, each of those questions were addressed. This goes to show that our mission to draw clear maps with citizen input is still a process that we believe in and that we practice and has been a model of transparency and openness throughout the whole entire process. I just want to thank them again for coming on. This is back-to-back duty, talking about Michigan's congressional and Senate maps yesterday, and then today about the Michigan House. Once again, next week we will be talking about the individual maps, and we'll put some information out. But so far, we have confirmation from Commissioner Rebecca Zatella that she will talk about her individual map for the House, individual map for the Senate, and the individual map for the congressional. Okay, without further ado, let's look at the Hickory map.
Okay, so the Hickory map is, excuse me, trying to load up. And again, here we have the Upper Peninsula about the same. Upper of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan is about the same. I'm trying to think where the actual differences are here, and I'm blanking, unfortunately. Was this where we changed Grand Rapids? I guess I can hold on. I guess I can turn on the overlay.
I think you're going to want to look more into the Holland area on this one.
The Holland area, okay. And let me take a look at adding the lines, because that will make it a lot easier for you folks watching to see the differences. Bear with me 1 second. We'll add Pine. And so here's some differences that we can see. And then I'm going to also add in Magnolia here as well. And it'll be a different color, but I'll turn that off in just a second. Okay, so let's just take it to Pine. So the red lines are the pine map here on the hickory. So we'll be able to see the changes easier at that particular point when we zoom in particular areas. But I'm going to where we saw differences, and that was the Howland area and Kalamazoo. So Howland looks to be the same, but here we made changes. In the Battle Creek area, we can see that the lines changed dramatically as well.
Oh no, I meant I thought I said Howell, Dustin.
Howell?
Yes, Livingston County.
This is the same on. Oh no, that's right. We did make the changes here in Livingston County. And you can see the green outline showing differences.
Yeah, I believe this map is a little bit more similar to Magnolia than it is to Pine.
All right, so now the red line is the differences from Magnolia to the map here, where the red lines are Magnolia.
In this map, there's a little bit of a difference in the Dearborn area. Melvindale is included in district number 4, whereas in the other map it is separate and more with more of a downriver community. Yeah, District 3 over there. Yeah, so in this version we have Melvindale included in with a Dearborn district, Dearborn and some of Detroit, whereas in Magnolia, Melvindale was included into District 2, Lincoln Park, Ecorse, Allen Park, and the other downriver communities. Besides that, it's pretty similar to Magnolia. You know, besides the Livingston County changes, yeah, it's pretty similar. You know, when we make, like I said earlier, when you make one change, it often leads to smaller changes in other districts for population balance. So there might be a few more precincts here and there in order to make up that population for the change.
That's evident by looking at tiny areas like this where we had a change in just by adding a couple of voting precincts to make a change here. That could have been from something that was done here, for example, in Livingston County, where we'd have to go through, let's say, if we made a change in 49, having to bring population or remove population through 48, and then finally into 23, going into what looks to be District 22 here to see if we'd have to make changes just to get the population correct at that particular point. Because that is the number one criteria that we have to deal with is equal population and complying with the Voting Rights Act.
But even though we had the population was the number one thing, we still had to keep in mind, you know, the Voting Rights Act, communities of interest, to make sure that we weren't taking bits of them to make up the population. It was quite time consuming when we were trying to follow through with community interests and what the public wanted.
something that, kind of surprised me during this process, specifically on the house maps, because since the house maps only have about 91, 92,000 people in it, we were able to look at, smaller communities of interest that might have been appropriate in this map that might not have been appropriate in the Senate map or the congressional map. So, there are two things that kind of surprised me. One was that we were able to really put in that lakeshore district that's composed of, the Benton Harbor area all the way up to Saugatuck. And that, I think, was one of our most consistent requests from the community to have, a district like that. And that's only possible in a house map because the population is smaller. But the second thing, during our collaborative map process, it was real interesting to me how different townships are configured. Because normally when you think of a township, it's all just one, contiguous, block of land. But that's actually not the case. We saw that we try to click on a township, and part of the township would be in one area, and then let's say the airport, for example, would still be part of a township, but it would be disconnected and completely part of another area. So that was a hard problem to fix. Because then it's all, do you try to keep that area with the county, but then you have to make it connect, or the county or the township, but then you have to make it connect somehow to it. So I don't know how y'all felt about that, but I was always surprised at the unique geography that we have here in Michigan.
Right. And that you hit something, very important on the head there, is taking into account smaller communities of interest on the House district level, i.e., this particular Lakeshore district here, and here, and here, as well as, I believe, no, that was the Senate, but technically this as well. Another one that we can talk about then is the Midland area. Midland being part with Midland Township, going up into Gladwin. We could accommodate this particular community of interest in the House districts because of population alone, and the population had to be smaller. Whereas we heard many public commented on, say, the Senate map, the Tri-Cities should be together. And then in congressional, the Tri-Cities should be together, as well as including Flint. So we took all of those three things into account in each different type of map. So I think we did something great, and we did it definitely adhere to communities of interest as best as we possibly could through all the juggling that we had to do while drawing the House district maps, especially, but in all reality, the Senate and the congressional as well.
All right. Anything else that you would like to share on the Hickory maps from our stellar panel of Commissioner Villette, Commissioner Eade, and Commissioner Witches? All right. We had a few more comments that we want to address. This is the last comment we want to address. And he stated it twice. Poll skeptic, is there a difference between fairness and neutrality when drawing lines? For example, wouldn't it be neutral to not consider racial or partisan demographics? And he comes back and says, in other words, you can't target minorities, Republicans, or Democrats if you don't consider data that shows racial or partisan makeup.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I say any response. Go ahead. Thank you.
Well, the Michigan Constitution is very clear at what we can look at and what we can't look at. For example, the criteria number 4 says there can't be a disproportional advantage to any political party. It doesn't mention things like competitiveness or, things like that. It specifically says disproportional advantage as measured by court-accepted measures of partisan fairness. And those are specific measures that have been accepted by the courts And we looked at 4 of them during this process. We looked at efficiency gap, mean median difference, the lopsided margins test, and also the seats to votes ratio. And we looked at those because those are accepted measures of partisan fairness. And as far as the question as it relates to race and ethnicity, criteria number 1 is adherence to population and the Voting Rights Act. So because of the Voting Rights Act, we have to, by law, look at stuff like that in order to have a compliant map that meets the bar of the law.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to Candid Conversations with our outstanding panelists, Commissioner Eade, Commissioner Roulette, and Commissioner Witches. We'll have another edition of Candid Conversations next week when we'll talk about individual maps. If by chance we can't stress it enough, we love public feedback. We love public feedback. You can do it online, or you can come to our meetings. Our next meeting will take place a week from today, December 16th, Thursday, December 16th, at the Cadillac Place in Detroit, Michigan at 10 o'clock a.m. Once again, our next meeting takes place Thursday, December 16th at 10 o'clock a.m. at the Cadillac Place in Detroit, Michigan. And then the final meeting that's scheduled at this time is Tuesday, December 28th at the Cadillac Room in Lansing, Michigan. Once again, thank you so much for participating in Candid Conversations, where we talk today about Michigan's House map. And yesterday we dealt with Michigan congressional and Michigan Senate map. Once again, this is Candid Conversations with your host, Edward Woods III, the Communications and Outreach Director for the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission.